Now, before I'm going to show you the second way to script this, I'm going to touch on this procedure naming thing again. The reason why we add the proc check if player has all apples thing, I have the proc here in front, I mean, is because this looks exactly like a database description. And actually, if you have a typo in here, it actually turns into a database description if I remove this. As for example, Osiris is now going to think that this is a database. And it's even going to compile, which we'll see. And that's one of the dangerous things in Osiris. There's no warning giving for this, no error, because that's the flexibility of Osiris, that you can declare these databases on the fly. So whenever you need one, you can just write something like that, and you create a database and added something to it. But the downside is if you have a typo there, or even a typo in a function call here, or like you forgot a parameter, Osiris is going to think that it's a database. And your story will build, see there's no errors. It's just not going to work. So that's important to keep in mind if you have things that don't work. Check for typos and things like that. Which is also why the naming convention that we have. I'll explain a bit more to look for problems in a bit. What you can do. So that was that. Let's show you the other way to script this. And actually we've covered a lot now. We have multiple procedure definitions. We have queries. We have setting here of the events. So we've pretty much seen all the hard stuff in Osiris already. There's a couple more intricate things that I'll tell you about in a bit. But we're pretty much there. So let's take a look at how you can script this, but without using the query here. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce databases that aren't just have one entry. So databases that look more like our dialogues database here. These things, you can think of them as keys from a database, if you're familiar with them. Basically, every time you write something like this, you add it to a database, to the little folder. But it's also a field that you can use to search on. And it's actually a row that you added to the folder, to the database. Now, a row can have more than one column, which is what we're going to call them. And I'm going to show you how we can have a database with more than one column. So we just add a comma here. We're going to just modify our Jack Apples database here. And we're going to put the owner of the apple in there. Now we have a special character, which is called character null. And this is basically an invalid character. I mean, it doesn't exist. It's just there for scripting reasons. Just so in script you can check if something is valid or not. So what we have now is a database, and this will compile actually, which I'll show you in a bit. So we got 2 times database here now with the same name, but have different number of columns in their rows. Like the first one only has a item in there, an item and a character in there, and the second one is only an item. So it's almost there now. It's going to be done. So you see this built. Now this is allowed. You can have these are actually 2 separate databases, but they just have the same name. Osiris tells them apart because they have a different number of columns. What's not allowed, however, is if I would do this, for example, I have 2 databases with the same name, but they have the same number of columns. and they have a different type. This is a character, this is an item. If I build this, I'm gonna get an error. I wish this compiled faster. I just want to show you the error because sometimes these Osiris errors are a bit cryptic. So errors reported as expected. Let's open up our thing here. And it's going to say here, db jackapples, conflict with function definition, type of parameter 2 unknown. And that's because it doesn't know what the type is. Because it's a character here, and it's an item here, and he's conflicted. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So we're adding the owner of an apple to our jackapples database. So now we have 2 columns in our database. And pretty much what we're gonna do, we're gonna keep track of who owns an apple, one of those jackapples. And when we start the game, it's gonna be no one since they're just sitting in the world. So when we add the apple to our character, we're gonna change it here. And this is gonna be, we get the message here that an apple has been added to a player. We check if it's an apple that we're interested in, and we add here underscore old owner. Now this is going to be a lookup. What's going to happen here is we get this message. We have a tuple with apple and player that's created with the values filled in from the message here, from these two. Now we do a lookup on apple on this database. We have a new variable, old owner, and since it's not defined anywhere, the value will be filled in by Osiris. Basically, what this is going to do is, what this line says is, give me every row in the jackapples database that has an apple in has this apple in the first column. So we only have one row here that's going to be returned, but in theory, this could generate more tuples. If, for example, this one, we have this situation. If we pick up this apple, this will generate 2 tuples because there's 2 different characters that have this apple. I hope you can follow along with this because it's fairly fundamental for Osiris. So you can have different columns, more than one column in a database, and as long as the columns are different in a row, they're going to be added as new entries. So doing this will not add a new row, this statement, because we already have it. If I change it to player 1, we'll have 2 rows in our database because these 2 are different. So it's not going to replace it. So basically we ask Osiris here to give us the old owner of the apple. And the first time we pick up the apple, this is going to be character null. And then we're going to remove the old owner with our not. And we're going to add the player as a new owner. So this is going to remove the old owner. This is going to add the new player. This is important that we remove the old owner, or we're going to have, like I said, we'll add a new row here, and this apple one will have multiple rows attached to it, which we don't want. We only want to have an apple in there once with its owner. We don't want the apple and every single owner it used to have. So what we do now is we got this event. We checked if it's an apple and we got the owner. We removed the old owner in the apple and we added the apple and the new owner. So now if we're gonna check, actually let's do the remove part first. So if we removed an apple from a player, we're gonna do the exact same thing. We're gonna check the owner. We could check here with the player. Doesn't really matter, because normally if you picked it up, this will be the player that's set as owner. So we're just gonna here remove the entry here in the database, and we're gonna replace it with character null again. So pretty much this line says, if an apple is removed from a player, and that player was the owner of the apple here, remove it, because it's no longer the owner, and character null, which is nobody, is the owner of the apple again. So now we have the bookkeeping for that. We're gonna take our procedure, let's rename it here, because it's nicer to have capitals here since it's more readable. Now, so we have our player. Now, what we can do is we can check on our Jack Apples database, request the owner for an apple as well, like we do here. So here we come here at the top, we say loop over every apple, give me the owner, and then we're gonna check if the owner is different from this player. And remember, we do that with the not equal. And then we're just gonna set something in a database. Player doesn't own all apples. It's a pretty long name. And we're just gonna put 1 in here. So this is database, like I said, we just defined it on the fly, it didn't exist before. And we just put the number 1 in there. And you'll see this done often. This is just basically a quick flag, true, false. So we set this here. So when we get here in this procedure, we're gonna loop over every apple and his owner. So over every row in this database. And if the owner is not the player that we want to check, that means that either the apple is not picked up yet or someone else has the apple. So we set this here, that the player doesn't own all the apples. Now we have to check, like, if this has not been set in this event, it means that the player owns every apple that's in this database. So we can check on that, and again we take our procedure here. I'm just gonna get rid of all this here. So if this is not set, then it means that we do own every apple, and we can set this event. Let's get rid of this. We'll get back to this one later. So it's important to know that we need to have the 1 here in the database, or we can't check it. You could define an empty database like this that doesn't add anything. This will compile, but then you can't check on it if there's something in there because it's empty. So you need to have the 1 in there so we can check it here if it's in there or not. So of course, if we're gonna call this multiple times, we should clean this up, because if we get in here the first time and he hasn't picked up every apple, we're gonna add this to the temporary database. We're gonna check it, and then if we don't clean it up, next time we pick up the second apple and the last apple, we don't want this to be set because we're checking it here. So what we have here in our third procedure here that we kept here, we're just gonna remove this fact again from the database. Yeah, and I call this facts because that's what they're called internally in Osiris. These rows, they call them facts. So let's recap what happens here. We come in here the first time, we check every apple and their owner. If the owner is not equal to this player, we set this temporary database entry here to indicate that he doesn't own all the apples. This procedure is going to end. Osiris is going to execute the next procedure definition it has, which is going to be this one. If this is not set, that means we didn't get here. That means he has every apple. We set this event, and then this procedure will end. Either it didn't execute the then, if this was set, it won't execute the then, but it'll end then. And Osiris is going to jump to this one, and then it's going to remove the doesn't own all apples thing. Even if this wasn't set, so if the player did own all the apples, it's safe to remove this then. It's safe to remove this line even if it's not in there. Osiris will not complain about that. It's just gonna not do anything. So now we set our event, we clean it up, and we're ready to test it in game actually now. So let's compile this to see if we made any mistakes. We actually did make a mistake. Apparently there's still an old version here. We can get rid of this actually, because we don't have that database anymore. Completely forgot about this part. So we're gonna loop over our apples here, but we don't care about the owner in this part. So we're gonna put our underscore again that we've seen in the beginning. Remember, the underscore is an unnamed variable. It means that you don't care whatever is in there. So that's it. That was easy. As you can see, the error messages sometimes are a bit cryptic. This was because, remember what I said, you can have databases with the same name, but not with a different amount of columns. So it was another example of that. So we'll build this. But that's how you learn these things, of course, by trying things and seeing what goes wrong. And of course, if you have the main scripting to look at, you have a lot of examples to see how things were done. Because a lot of complicated systems were actually done straight in Osiris. So you're free to look at that, modify them as you want. And we get a success now. So let's try this in game. Our dialogue is correct this time. There we go. So let's talk to him, get the quest. Okay. Poor wolf, there's a lot of them being killed here. As you noticed, when you build story, or reload story, global items are not reloaded. That's because Osiris doesn't know about local items, so they're not being reset. So these are all items that dropped from killing the wolf, and those are local, since they weren't placed in the editor and made global. So that's why they're still all lying here. So the wolf is there again. Let's kill it. There we go. Let's pick up our apples. So we got our apples here in our inventory. It's always important to test what you scripted, even though you're going to be pretty sure that's going to work. It's always a good idea to actually test it. Oh good, you found them, thanks so much. And our apples are gone. So all that's working. Let's go back to the story editor for a bit here. So there's a couple more things I want to say. This is more like wrapping up loose ends and showing you guys a couple things that are done in the main scripting part of the game that could be useful to you, save you some time. First off, that remember this trigger we did? You have to walk into the trigger, and then we unregistered it, and then we made the enemy appear. For those things, first off, this trigger won't work for companions or henchmen that you have, only for players. So to fix that, we actually have a proc trigger register for players. And I'll double check because we don't have autocomplete on procedures. Yes, that's what it's called. So that one also comes with an unregister for players call. And this is a procedure, as you can tell from the proc in front of it. There we go. And this procedure is just gonna register the trigger for your henchmen and your companions as well. On top of that, we also have something that's called a one-shot player trigger. And this is a database, and I'll explain in a bit how it works actually. And we're gonna put a trigger in there, and then I'm gonna get rid of this. I'll explain in a bit what this thing does. There's a procedure that comes with it. So you see, there's no magic in this. This is all things you've seen. So we don't care about the player again. And we filter manually here on our trigger. So what this database does is when a trigger is added to it, it's going to register that trigger for your players, your companions, your henchmen. And it's going to make sure that when you walk in there, you only get this thing only once. Now this could be important for when your party teleports into a trigger, because then you'll get a character enter trigger event for every party member that teleported in. And that's sometimes you only want something to happen once, like starting a dialogue, for example. So we have that system in place to make sure that it only happens once. And speaking of dialogues, there's also a database which you might find useful, which is the DB one-shot dialogue trigger. And there's a couple of these actually. You have the normal one. You can see here what the parameters are. So this is basically you walk into the trigger, it's going to start this dialogue with this NPC. Now there's also a trigger with the new system. Where is it? I saw it here. This one. So if I look for this one, you'll see what it takes as parameters. If I can find it here. So yeah, trigger, dialogue, and a character as well. And the way that works is this is going to take sneaking and invisibility into account. So if you're in the trigger and you're actually visible, it's going to start the dialogue. So you can check the implementation of these things, because you'll also have to assign a script to the character that you want to start the dialogue with. So, but if you check the main game, you'll see how those things are used. You can check the characters, how they're set up, all those things. It's just, I just want to show you that we have these things and it could save you time, so you don't have to do it again. So those are pretty much the most important things in there, procedure-wise. If you want to do player comments, we have a database for player comments. If I click it, you'll see what it looks like. You have an ID for the player comments. You can choose this one. It's just a unique ID, so you give it a name basically. This is going to be the text to say if there's one player, that's the first line. And this if there's two players, so if the players are close enough to each other, these player comments will play on both players. If they're too far apart, you only get it on one player. So this is the first line for a two-player comments, and this is the second line for a two-player comments. And if you look for the ID, you can see how you launch these. And this procedure launch player comment with a player, starting player. So those are just things I'm showing you to be aware of. Now, I just want to explain one more thing. Let's build this first to see if we made any mistakes. There we go. Build successful. I want to explain one thing so you know how it works. You see this here? I told you it's a database. Now, when you add something to a database, and if you remove something actually as well, Osiris is also going to check every rule, so every if-then part that uses this this database. So what you can do then, for example, if we use our Jack Apples database, like if, and this is gonna look weird, but trust me on this one. You can do this, for example. So when I add something to this database, Osiris is going to check every rule that uses this database, and the rule that uses this database here is going to be, well, it's not going to check this one since it's using events and the events aren't thrown, but this rule here uses the database, so Osiris is going to check it again, and it's going to fill in these lines which was removed. So if I add this, then Osiris is going to add Jack Apple and character null to the Jack Apples 2 database. Same thing for when I remove something. I can react to this like this. For example. And this is advanced stuff, but it's used quite a bit because it can save a lot of work. So when I remove a line here, a row from the DB Jack Apples database, it's going to check every rule again that uses it. So this one won't get checked because it was removed. But like this one, for example, because removed, so it's not in this database anymore. But for this one example, this part is used here in the end, and we have a Jack Apple and owner that's still in Jack Apples 2 here since we added it here. It's no longer in this database, so then it's going to remove it from this database too. And that's pretty much how these things work. So they react to the one-shot player trigger event database being modified, and then they do something. So if I look for the implementation, which is going to be, I don't know where it's going to be, probably here, you can see that if the one-shot player trigger is added to this database, we're going to register it with the procedure. So again, nothing magic happening there, just something you should be aware of, that you can do it, because it's a little bit obscure. So pretty much, if you add something to a database, Osiris will check every rule with the values for those variables here filled in. So you can do things like this, add it to another database, or check if it's been removed. Because just checking on removing something from a database you can't do. You can't do just this, for example. This won't work. You need to do it like this. The other thing I should tell you is if you have your scripting and you want to know what's available, like definition-wise, you have the story header here that's generated every time you hit generate definitions. So you can open the story header and then you see all the calls and the queries that exist in the game and all the events as well. So you get all that stuff, so you can check what's available. If you're wondering if something is possible, you can check it in there. That's that. Another important thing is when you're running the game, you're testing your things in the editor, you'll have a file generated here that's called osiris-log.log. And if we open this, I use Notepad++ because it's a lot more readable here. This is going to be the log of all the story that's being executed, and you see things here like add fact, that's a row being added to a database. And you see here that the game starts with executing the init sections. That's what I told you, remember, way back, that the init sections are going to be executed. But the important part is these things. When you see these things, the rule action part of then at line blah blah fires, that means that it's going to execute the then of a rule of an if-then statement. So you see that the call fails actually is because we don't have Jahan yet, but that's okay. But you see a line number here that's defined, and actually, if we go to our Divinity Original Sin folder here, mods, Osiris demo story, we have another file here that's called story.div, and this is a text file. We can open this with Notepad++. And when you see a line here, a line number, Control C this, then we hit Control G, you can jump to it, you hit go, you can see this is the bit that was executed. And if we check the log, character make NPC, see that's in here, detach from group, the call that failed, that's this one here. So this is really handy to debug why something isn't working, because you're testing it and you're wondering, well, why didn't this work? The log is the only thing you have, so you just have to read. You have to learn how to read it. It takes a bit of time to know how to read it. Basically, when you see event, there's none in there because I just built typical. But if I would go in game here, and this takes a while, of course, because it's doing the init, and you'll see this will be updated in our story log here if I reload it from disk. So if I look for event, I should have something more. There we go. So these things, these event things, are the messages that get sent to Osiris. So these are the ones that you want to look for. Like for example, if you want to know why a dialog doesn't work, you go to your log and you look for dialog start requested, and then you see it here. got our event. And then you see it's this then part here was executed. So if we go back to our story.div in our mods folder, hit Control G, we can go there, and then we see that it's this bit of script that got executed. So, and you see it's gonna nest. You see the one here. You can see it's an Osiris procedure call that we're gonna do. So we're calling a procedure here, and it's gonna nest because we're inside the procedure. So this can nest pretty deep, as you can tell. But this is the only way you have to troubleshoot your problems. Another important thing that I haven't mentioned, well, I mentioned it briefly, but Osiris is going to execute story in the order it finds it in the file. So basically when you build Osiris, everything gets thrown together in the story.div file. So if you have procedures, if I look for the procedures we make, where's the story editor? Here it is. Check if player has all apples. If I look for this one, here's the definitions here, the procedures we made in our KB or knowledge base. It's going to execute this one first, then this one, then this one, and then this one. But this is important to remember that Osiris is going to execute things based on the order in this file. And important to know is that Osiris is going to sort these calls alphabetically and put them in alphabetical order in the file. Sometimes this is important, like if you add something to a database and the goal that reacts to the database is not active yet, it's not being read in yet, then nothing will happen. So it's little things like that. So you have to be careful with those things. Sometimes with the order something is executed in. So I think that's pretty much it for Osiris. I think we've covered pretty much everything. The best way to learn Osiris is really by just using it. If you have questions, you can always come to our forums. It will be checked by Larry and employees, by myself as well. So we can always help you out there. Osiris does have a bit of a learning curve, but it's really not too bad. You don't need to be a programmer or super smart to do things with this. Remember, you have all of the main story scripting, so you have a lot of examples to work with. So feel free to copy paste things or whatever, change them, and by doing those things you should grasp Osiris pretty quickly. So that's it for the Osiris tutorial.